Ted?
Hi, everybody. John Dunn is having trouble getting on. He's in Delaware. So I just sent him the phone message as well. So just let's hang tight for a minute. And everybody got the email with the spreadsheets?
Yes.
All right, so let's just hold tight for a minute.
Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
I can, yes. There's some weird feedback going on, but no, we don't need company.
Ted, you're logged in twice. You're as an attendee as well as a panelist.
Okay, hold on.
Do you want to start from your phone?
No, let me log out for the phone.
I'm not sure. Greg, I think we can get rid of him, remove as a.
I can only remove him as a panelist, so I'm not sure which.
No, as an attendee, I think. Here, hold on. I just got rid of him as an attendee.
Okay.
So Ted, you should be good now. And John just called, like I said, John called and said he couldn't get on, so I sent him the phone number. Oh, Ted's back again. There's two of you again, Ted.
I don't know why it's popping up on my phone and my computer here. Hold on, let me try and get rid of one.
There you go.
Should be out of one now.
Yep.
All right, I'll stick with the phone.
And we're expecting Joel and Mark?
I talked to Mark a few minutes ago. He said he was good, as did Joel.
All right. Oh, we're still early. Greg, are you going to stay, Greg, or it's totally up to you?
I have something at 6.
Okay. Yeah.
But I can stick around if you need me.
No, I mean, no, because this is really the John show.
Okay.
But just so you guys know, Greg is on the school building committee, so he is also a wealth of knowledge in this area.
Great.
And Jill, just so you know, when Vicky set this up, she didn't set it up with the practice session, so it's recording, but it'll get clipped once you call the meeting to order for posting to the website.
Okay, that's fine. So Ted, just so you know, not that I expect a lot of attendees and or questions, but I can see anyone who's here from that's not one of the panelists. I can see the attendees because I'll be the host, so I'll let you know if people join.
Oh, good. All right. I can't see. I can only see myself, Greg, and Paul
Yeah.
on the phone.
I won't be able to see their faces, but they'll either have a name. But I've never seen anyone attend one of our meetings before.
No. Now, will the meetings, if they're recorded, do I need to take notes and post notes, or is that going to be done automatically?
Well, it's interesting you say that. The meeting will be recorded, and we currently in our department are not posting separate minutes because we don't have any admin. We don't have anybody to take minutes and to change the recordings into minutes. But a counselor, my understanding is a counselor tonight had a complaint about that already. So I would recommend eventually getting minutes.
I'll take some minutes and post them up then.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Mike.
Hello, how are you? Sorry about that. Struggled to get on again.
Yeah, Joel, hi Joel, also. John Dunn is having problems getting on, so I'm gonna, should I call him again? And oh, Mark Olson is an attendee, so I'll move him in. Move to panelist, and I bet you this is, so Mark should be in. Welcome, Mark. You are now on the panelist side. This is John again. What's up, John?
So Jill and Greg, I assume you're thrilled to see that I totally solved the 50R Maplewood Avenue problem, knocking out of the park, right?
I'm glad you summed up our meeting tonight in an editorial last night. Great job.
Yeah, I mean, not me. Always trying to win friends.
John came in as an attendee, so he's calling back in and I'll move him. He just called and then said he was an attendee, but I will, as soon as he's back in, we'll get started.
Great.
And just a heads up, I have the zoning board at 7, so I'll be cutting out then if we're not done by then.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Hey, John. Oh, I can't hear Joe anymore.
Let's go. Come on. Not chasing the cat. Get over here. Azra. House. Danielle.
Who are we waiting for?
I think we were waiting for John Dunn to come back in. I can't hear Jill.
Can you hear me? Can you hear John Dunn?
I can hear you now, John. Yep.
Okay, very good. So I'm on.
For some reason, we lost Jill.
Ah.
I can see her, but I can't hear her. Mute. Did we lose Jill?
Just gonna log out and log back in, I guess.
It may be so much easier someday when we can actually meet.
You know, it's a mixed bag. Like over on the school committee, we're actually gonna we're looking into some technological solutions so that even when we get back in person, we'll still have Zoom running, because it's really enabled, you know, literally hundreds of people to attend our meetings. So otherwise, you know, due to childcare reasons or work reasons or whatever, would never be able to attend or even fit into the room that we normally meet in up in Blackburn. You know, so there are definitely things that suffer from these Zoom meetings, but there are in some ways, you know, things that benefit. Like when I go to the zoning board next, I always come with these PowerPoint presentations, and up in Kairos, that projector's not great and that screen's kind of in the wrong place. And so it's not nearly as effective as doing a Zoom ZBA meeting, because they can see, you know, a really crisp set of pictures, crisp set of plans, you know. It's a mixed bag.
Hello, this is John Dunn again. I got thrown out.
Oh, I can hear you again, John.
Okay, thank you. Very good. So I'm here until I get thrown out again.
All right, we won't throw you out. We're just waiting for Jill. But if she doesn't come in a moment, we'll get going. Paul, Joel, you guys can still hear me? Okay. Why don't we call this to order, and I'll start with the preamble that we have to read, which says, consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings of more than 25 people, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation to the greatest extent possible. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time. In the event that a live transmission proves unworkable for any reason, or audio or video recording transcript, or an audio video transcript, or other comprehensive recording of the meeting will be made available on the city's website as soon as possible. I'll take those meeting minutes and have it up there. And I would just like to say that we have myself, Joel Favazza, Paul Romery, Mark Olson, Greg Catamatori, John Dunn, the CFO, the City of Gloucester, Mike Hale, the DPW Director, and in and out we had Jill Cahill, the Community Development Director. So tonight we have an agenda which starts off with the East Gloucester Veterans Memorial Combined Elementary School. And I think before we get started, my intent to have this item on the agenda was to hear from John Dunn since our last meeting where we all could be at a meeting in March. We'd like to hear from John what, if anything, has changed in our position with regards to that school. We all know, and we're not here to discuss the location of it, the softball field, all the other pieces and moving parts thereof. We know we have one school that's 72 years old. We have one school that's 64 years old, and we have an opportunity to capture funding that school by way of receiving about 40% or just shy of 40% of the total dollar value. So, John, can you start off by giving us an update, letting us know what's changed, if anything, with that position that you gave us in March, going over the matrix that you sent us, and what's next going forward with the position and votes that the city has taken and the MCBA has taken regarding the project?
Okay, did everybody get the spreadsheets that I sent to Jill and she was going to distribute?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So let me kind of start with that. So the first spreadsheet is a summary of where we are now with debt service in the general fund, and also kind of a future look at layering in additional debt service as we move forward through the years. So this has been updated. We issued some debt in September. We also refunded some debt from 2009, so that essentially lowered the interest rate. The overall issue was about $8 million. It was kind of split between general fund, water, and sewer, and the overall rate on the issue was 1.4% for 20 years, an incredible number. So this spreadsheet in the first couple of columns reflects the current status of debt service looking into the future. And then what I've done in kind of the middle columns, the first one being labeled as FY 2022 issue, I've kind of layered debt in $4.5 million a year, 22 and 23 at 2.5%, and then 2024 out to 2033 at 4.5%. I have to admit, I have no idea whether those interest rates are going to be valid. I feel fairly comfortable that the first couple of years are probably fairly accurate. It might, in fact, be a little bit high based on comments from the Federal Reserve and their target rates. So I feel fairly comfortable about that. Kind of on the bottom portion of that spreadsheet is just a summary of debt to be issued. So those are the portions of loan orders that are out there that have already been approved, recommended by the mayor and approved by the city council. You'll see there is one big aspect, the city hall renovations. Then there's no dollars attributed to that. And that really is because we really haven't defined the scope on that. So the scope, depending on where it ends up, could bring this in at $5 million to $8 million. Now there's that in terms of the specific project for the city hall. There are some funds available within other city coffers, and it's likely that the Community Preservation Committee will also approve a piece for them to issue as debt, which will reduce the amount the city's going to have to borrow on the total project once it's defined. But at this point, I've identified about $21.5 million that is going to be issued at some point. And you can add to that another, let's say, $7 million for City Hall, which puts us about $28 million. So that's 6 years worth of issuance at $4.5 million a year. So you can kind of see how that gets layered in. The third column from the right is the total. And then what I've done in the second column from the right is taken the current debt service budget in the general fund and have increased that by 1.5% a year. And then that final column all the way on the right shows the differential between what might come in as actual debt service versus what might be budgeted for debt service. So the good news here is that given this presentation and these assumptions, that this is reasonably affordable to the city. But it does point out the fact that we can't afford to do the school debt outside of an override vote. There's just not enough capacity there. A lot of numbers here, a lot of information. Be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have regarding this particular spreadsheet.
Do you have any questions, Paul?
Just quickly on the police station, that number keeps increasing. So is this sort of the final scope, do you think?
No, it's not, I have to say. So the City Hall and the police station have not gone through, and I misstated earlier, they are not subject to existing loan orders at this point.
Okay.
And that goes down to the fact that the scope hasn't been adequately defined. We have talked with Dorr and Whittier in terms of their recommendations on what has to be done and their estimate of what that would cost. So in terms of the police station, that's what I used. There are a number of things at the police station particularly on HVAC issues. And it's not just the police station itself, but also the courthouse. So it's that entire building that has to be redone. So there are, tremendous HVAC issues there. There's security issues, all that need to be corrected. Again, the City Hall renovations, there's a number of things in there that we may choose to do or not to do. So that will have a direct effect on the total amount of work that has to be done on City Hall.
Thank you.
Joel, do you have your hand up? Go ahead.
On that topic of the police station, do we have an idea of how much has already been laid out? My understanding is that work has already been performed over the last couple of years, new windows and that sort of thing. Do you know where we are for a total so far?
Well, yeah, so there was initially a loan order that was approved by the council for $650,000, and some of that work has been done. And obviously, the scope of what has to be done in that building has changed considerably. So at this point, there has been, don't quote me on this, but I think that about $300,000 of that $650,000 has been spent on window improvements, and that, in fact, has already been bonded. But there's considerably more work to be done.
Joel, anything else on that issue? Mark, you have your hand up?
Yes, is that East Gloucester and Veterans ancillary costs of 4.2 million, as well as the feasibility study in addition to what we're going to be looking to fund and override?
Yes. So the agreement we have with MSBA at this point has established a project budget for the construction of the new school. And that is $66.7 million, with a fair amount of contingency built into that 66.7. The 4.2 covers, as we call them, ancillary costs, which are the movement of the softball field and improvements probably up at Green Street. It is also going to encompass the cost of swing space for staff and students at Veterans once we start on the project and demolition begins at the end of this school term. And it would also include the demolition of East Gloucester, renovations to the East Gloucester site to bring it into acceptable passive recreation land. The reason we did this is because these ancillary costs are not subject to any amount of reimbursement under the MSBA guidelines. So as we took a look at it, there's no point in including that in the total project presented to the MSBA because it wasn't going to change the 66.7, except adding it was not going to change the commitment by MSBA to the city of the grant range. And in fact, because particularly the demolition of East Gloucester and the renovation of the site are going to come at the very tail end of the project. And that would just delay the final order on the project for a piece of the project that is not going to be reimbursable at all. So we talked about this a number of times at the school building committee meetings and decided that the best thing to do was to just pull those ancillary costs that are not MSBA reimbursable out and to treat them differently. So they will be absorbed within the general fund debt service lines.
The second question was also on the feasibility for East Gloucester for $500,000. Was the same done for Veterans, and was that funded under a separate expense?
So the feasibility study basically covered where we are now. So that was review of sites, review of various approaches to the school. And the end result is the recommendation, as we're looking at now, of combining both schools into a new building located on the veteran site. And that feasibility study was $1 million, and that's included in the 66.7.
Joel?
Anything else, Mark?
Nope. Joel? Joel had his.
I just wanted, for the sake of the board, just to piggyback, as far as thought process regarding the 4.2, when the decision was made by the building committee to pull those expenses out of the project, there were those, including myself, who had concerns that, well, you know, is this the first step to East Gloucester or whatever becoming the next Maplewood Ave school or the next Fuller school where it's going to sit abandoned? And so as a show of good faith, the building committee and the city council pushed forward and put this $4.2 million in place ahead of the override vote to kind of protect against the override going through on the premise that, don't worry, we'll take care of East Gloucester. And then it turns out, oh wait, we don't have any money to take care of East Gloucester just now, so we can't do it, sort of thing. So one of the reasons that this was done in advance was to, again, try and hope to calm down anyone who says, you know, I don't buy it, I don't think that school's ever coming down, we never take down our old school buildings, we just leave them up. And so this is kind of there as part of a incentive to say, no, the city's really committed to doing a better job this time around with, you know, moving out of an old building that had, you know, twice before.
And just one more comment on
Thanks,
that
Bill.
4.2 million, if I could. So that is something that is going to be spent after, you know, if the November 3rd vote is successful, and we then go forward and do our funding agreement with MSBA and do a loan order before the city council for 66.7 million, you know, then the 4.2 will stay there. If that doesn't happen, if the vote in November is not successful in terms of agreeing to the override, then the $4.2 million loan order will be rescinded.
Also, if I can sort of keep hopping on this, while I have all of you, I would invite you all next Wednesday at 5 p.m. The programs subcommittee of the school committee is going to meet via Zoom, and one of the agenda items is to discuss the potential for housing any students that are going to be displaced by the construction within city-owned buildings. I don't know which way that presentation is going to go. I don't know whether the administration is going to have viable options or have options that show it really isn't viable. We really do need to go rent space somewhere, but it may be useful for this board to, if you have the chance to sit in and just kind of hear, because of that 4.2 built into it is the anticipation that if we go to a third-party site like St. Anne's, we'll have to spend money potentially in upgrading that site and spend money potentially renting that site, and looking to explore to see whether that money could be spent either upgrading existing buildings or not spent because existing buildings might have some sufficient space. And so that's Wednesday at 5, if any of you have a chance to listen to it. Obviously, it gets recorded and you can watch it after the fact also.
Joel, what was that subcommittee again?
It's the programs subcommittee of the school committee.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions on this particular spreadsheet?
No, I am good.
Okay, very good. All right, so if we go to the next one, so the one that is titled East Gloucester Veterans Debt Service Impact on Tax Levy. So what we're looking at, and we talked about this before, is that there have already been 2 debt shifts to the general fund, one for water and one for the CSO cost within the sewer aspect. And I've kind of labeled and put these things out there. This is what we're committed to in terms of debt service, the water shift and the CSO shift, and then a total of the shift. And what I've tried to do is look at, as those debt shifts are paid off, layering in the cost of the school if the override is successful. And the idea here was to minimize as best as we could the impact of that additional debt service that would be associated with the school. This is one approach. There's many approaches. Again, what I've been playing with is, we talked about an impact of 20 cents per $1,000 of value on property, whether that be real property or personal property. And what we can see here is the way we kind of layered it in, a big borrowing in 21 at 1.75% for 25 years, a later borrowing in fiscal 25 at 5.5% for 25 years. And then we can just go all the way out to the far right column, and you can see the impact per 100K well, yes, per 100K of value. So, I've talked about 20 cents on 1,000. In this particular spreadsheet, I've just upgraded it to whatever the cost is going to be on 100,000 of value, just because it makes the math a little bit easier. Again, this is just one approach. There's multiple approaches. Again, we don't know exactly what the interest rates are going to be. If the override is successful, I am going to suggest to the mayor, after the loan order is approved, that we take down as much as we can based on where current interest rates are, because they are so attractive. So that's how this one is set up. So the assumption here is that there's going to be 45 million in total debt issued. I don't think that's the case. It's probably going to be less, but just trying to be as conservative as we can in terms of talking to people and letting people know what the projected impact might be. We decided to err on the high side a bit. Even though the MSBA has made a commitment to us, that grant amount is subject to eligible costs. So we can see that kind of in the middle of the page, I've got stabilization support, and that really is there to hold down those costs in those particular years. The first 2 years of the second issue comes online. Again,
Hey,
lots of numbers
John,
here. Yep.
John, if I could, what's the that made you take this model of financing? Is this just something?
Sorry, can I say that again?
Ted, you're frozen.
Or debt service? Is this something that we, or this is one of many models. What was so desirable with this one? Debt service, yeah.
Yeah, again, this is, Ted, I didn't hear all of your question. I'll try and kind of figure out what you asked, but, there's a number of different ways to issue debt. The city can do it by itself. In this particular case, what is proposed here is that we would issue debt through what they call the State Qualified Bond Act, which is SQBA. and that allows some flexibility in the structure of the debt service payments that we wouldn't otherwise have because we have to issue debt according to state law. So this would be a way to have a little bit of flexibility for holding down some of the initial impact on the tax rate. But again, my approach here is to try and moderate the maximum impact to less than 20 cents per thousand, and try, as we can see here, keep it down to 17 and a half cents.
Okay, thanks. Mark, go ahead.
If I may ask, what the 45 million is supposedly a conservative. What's the high and low that got us to the 45 is our estimate?
I think the 45 is the absolute high. The low could be 39 million. So again, we have a fair amount of contingency built into the 66.7 at this point. Where any of the contingency is going to come back to the school building committee to consider whether we should use those contingency funds. And as we did with West Parish, that particular school building committee actually didn't use all the contingency. Were actually pretty sparse with using the contingency, and therefore that project came in under budget. So I would expect that we would do the same thing here, try and hold down the use of the contingency, which would then reduce that 45 million considerably.
That answer your question?
Yeah, that would probably drop to 17 cents long term, probably over 15 something per thousand. Yep, thank you.
I'm sorry, whoever was speaking, you completely broke up on my end.
Hey, Mark, do you want to try and shut your video off to see if your audio comes through clearer? Sometimes if there's limited bandwidth, you get a better chance with just the audio.
I can do it for Mark. Hold on a second. I think. Stop it. Mark,
Can you
try
hear me now?
talking now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you, Joel.
You want to go ahead with your question, Mark?
No, I said if we went down to the lower 39 million number, what would that tax impact? It would probably get down by a couple, 3 cents, I'm gonna guess.
Probably, yes.
Thank you.
You never get a hearty round of applause for coming in less, but you do get rotten tomatoes for coming in more.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, John, please continue.
Okay, so there's one final chart, and this is just something to think about way in the future. So the city has a fairly heavy annual pension liability, and 75% of that is the amortization of the actuarial unfunded liability. If somebody really wants to know what that is, give me a call and put aside a half an hour. But the thing is, at this point, we have a structured plan, and that is reviewed every 2 or 3 years by an actuary. It goes to PERAC in Boston to be approved, and then basically puts in place the annual assessment for the pension liability. So this chart shows what happens when that actuarial unfunded liability is finally retired. And we are on schedule now to make the last payment on that in 2034. By legislation, we are allowed to go out to 2040 to do this, but we have tried to be a bit more aggressive about making it go away and fund it properly. So what you can see here is that in 2034, the total contribution, including the unfunded liability, is $25 million. A year later, the total assessment for normal cost drops to about $4 million. So a swing of $21 million. Now, some of that is going to have to be aimed at another unfunded liability that we have, which is what they call other post-employment benefits, which is health insurance for retirees. So that will suck up a lot of this, that $21 million swing. However, it doesn't necessarily have to suck up all of it. So I'm just presenting this for people to start thinking that if a school basically takes 10 years start to finish with the MSBA process. So identify a statement of interest, meetings with an appointed school building committee to define what it is that they want to do for the next one, and presuming that the city wants to combine the 2 remaining elementary schools into one and build it. If you think about it from that point of view, starting on that project in 2023, 2024, then brings you out to 10 years later by the time debt is issued on a new school, if that is going to be the case. Then you've got the capacity, presuming that this is going to hold true, you've got the capacity to build that new school and absorb the debt service within the general fund without an override. So I just put that out now. It's something to think about, but it's probably something that the city is going to have to do. So this is potentially a way to look at it, to establish some base timelines about how to deal with it financially. And that's why I present this. So just food for thought.
Okay, thank you. Any
So could I
questions?
just,
Go ahead, Paul.
yeah, just, so the other big project that's hanging out there, which I know is the sewer plant secondary treatment. And then you might have some other ancillary costs around flood control, flood prevention, that is in addition to the high school project that's on this list. But that's sort of the big enchilada as far as anyone's aware of. And how does any of that fit into this, John? And this might be a Mike question as well.
Well, from my point of view, it doesn't fit into it. It's, the city has not agreed at this point that, it's going to move forward on the secondary treatment plant. And, until I have further information on that as to what may happen, I can't really kind of put it out there. The fact of the matter is that normally, if we were to do some renovations or an extensive renovation on the current sewer treatment plant, that would be absorbed within the sewer rates. So until we have more information about what could happen, what the cost might be, what the timeline of the project might be, what we're required to do, what we're not required to do, how much grant money might be available for a project like this, I can't even include that here. So what I'm doing here is talking about the impact on the general fund. I'm trying to just kind of focus on that. So
Okay.
so this is reasonable information that we have right now that I can do some reasonable projections on, but as to this other project that may or may not have to be done, I can't do anything until there's further information derived.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can just hop on the back of that, I don't know again if it's for Mike or for Joe or for John, but that approach sounds, again, I wasn't around for it, but that approach sounds very similar to the approach that was taken with the CSO, which was, well, we don't want to do it and we're not agreeing to do it. And then one day the Fed came and said, I don't care, you're going to do it. And then it kind of, devastated our city budget for.
John,
is that risk, is the same risk here someday? We say we don't want to do it, and then the federal government steps in and says, I don't care what you want, you got to do it, and you got to do it yesterday. And we have another CSO situation where we're just like spending money we don't have and cutting everything else to fund it.
John, I can try. You want me to try?
Yeah, Mike. I mean, you're much closer to this than I am. So,
I mean, I think the juxtapose the CSO and secondary treatments is fair. Back in the late '80s, we basically thumbed our nose at the federal government for mitigating combined sewer issues, and that goes back to the Clean Water Act. So we already had 15 or 20 years of the Clean Water Act, 15 years of the Clean Water Act to be prepared to mitigate CSOs. And so we fought and we lost. And we wound up starting, another 11 years, 12 years later to actually implement something, which was the modified consent decree and the long-term control plan that dealt with the Clean Water Act and the city's responsibility to mitigating a combined sewer system that overflowed into the harbor. I do think there was a lot of unnecessary hand-wringing through the entire process up until when the process really began in the mid-2000s. And it wasn't as big a project as people think it is. It's kind of the Paul Bunyan of construction projects. It has the sense that it was bigger than life. It really wasn't. It was a $40 million project. I've spent $40 million 3 or 4 times over in my career as director. And they were necessary improvements. I think if we had taken the time in the 90s to do this, we certainly would have been spent less than the $40 million. And so secondary, same thing. The Clean Water Act envisioned secondary treatment for municipalities who are treating wastewater. We had a primary plant with a secondary waiver granted in 1984 that's been continued to this day, with a tentative denial kind of as the bookmark for us today. We are the only community in Massachusetts with a secondary waiver. We are one of the few communities in the country with a secondary waiver. This will happen. And I think we just need to be prepared for it. We're taking measures now. We have a potential grant opportunity to protect the entire campus on Essex Avenue from rising tide waters, storm surge, and so forth. I mean, that was something that we didn't envision doing even 10 years ago when we started talking about secondary treatment. But that's a reality today. We've seen it. So as we start to prepare for the future, one step at a time, We haven't had formal discussions with EPA in the last year, mostly due to COVID. But we have still moved forward with fortifying the entire campus to protect the primary plant and the potential of secondary. We don't know what the cost is going to be. We don't know when it's going to happen, but I think we certainly need to be prepared for it because it will happen.
So to that point, just going back, I think my understanding is when the Clean Water Act was passed, there was actually federal and state programs that said, listen, if you do this, the Fed picks up 60%, Massachusetts was picking up 30%, and you paid a dime on the dollar. That was in the late 70s. And we said, no, because you have to tear up every street in town, the roads will be open for 4 years, it'll be a mess. And we all said no, right? And then you mentioned that in the late 80s, we got told, hey, you got to do it. And we said no again. And so what you just said tonight, which is that it cost us more than it needed to because we kept thumbing our nose, it sounds like we're walking right back. And I appreciate it was $40 million, which is, to me, a big number because we have to go override $40 million for the new school. And we don't have $40 million, right? And so it sounds like even though we are very aware of the trap we walked into on the CSO, and although we acknowledge there are similarities between the posture the city took then and the posture we're taking now with secondary treatment, it sounds like we're marching right down the exact same path where, as you said, someday this will come and it'll come with a big price tag and we'll go, well, geez, if we did that in 2020, it would have been less. Oh my God, if we'd done that in 2005, it would have been even, we'll be having the same conversation, right? So is there any plans from the administration to break the cycle and go, we're not going to do this again. We're going to proactively put plans in place to make sure we don't have to look back and go, I wish we had just listened. We all saw the writing on the wall and ignored it.
Joe, I think we've done that to some degree. I mean, I go back, a number of years ago when we lawyered up to have someone, basically, be in our corner to defend us against this, punitive action of secondary treatment. Well, it's not punitive. It's a reality of a 1974, federal legislation of the Clean Water Act that gave a temporary waiver to communities to come into compliance. Well, we built that primary plant, 10 years later, came online 10 years after the Clean Water Act without the benefit of secondary on a campus that was designed to house secondary with plans kind of canned for secondary. And those plans are defunct now. We can't use 1978 designs for a 2020 project. But I do believe we've been forthright with the federal and the state legislature regulators relative to this. We've met with them, not in a court setting, but in the mayor's office, in my office, and had discussions about what does it look like. And they recognize that we're in a position where whatever the cost is, it's more than the sewer rate can absorb comfortably. For years, you've read in the paper that Gloucester has the highest water and sewer rate in the country. We don't have the highest water and sewer rate on Cape Ann. So it's what you believe, how we posture, our utility rates. I mean, we pay significantly more for cable television in all our homes than we pay for water and sewer in a given year. Water and sewer, it's a lot to manage those facilities. So I do believe in proactive. I don't think we're taking the same approach. But again, we can't kick this can down the road for the next generation. We're going to have to do something proactively. But what that looks like is yet to be determined. I do believe we want to try to figure out if there's any opportunity for outside funding, partnership funding, or an opportunity to kind of roll this out in a timeline that meets our financial ability to pay for this. And we are. And again, I do believe that the flood protection that we're rolling out now is a huge step. I mean, that protects the existing plant and the potential for the secondary in the upcoming years. So I think it's a little bit different. Right? The federal grant, so 75 cents on a dollar essentially on that, which is pretty good. I'll take that any day. And if we could do something like that, this administration's been creative with grant funding. I mean, again, 21 years with the city. I think I've seen more grant funding out of this administration than any other. And it's a lot of work to get grants, a whole lot of work. I give Jill and Greg a lot of credit for what they did at the wastewater plant, getting that grant, because I felt like I was running into a door that was closed repeatedly with them And they kept knocking. They kept at it, and lo and behold, they were successful.
Okay,
So lesson learned, Joel. I think you're right. We can't do this. We can't repeat that.
Mike, are we still talking in the 60 to 70 million dollar range though? I mean, I know this is a shot in the dark for a number, but and I'm just thinking out loud, if there was a change in administration and there was a big infrastructure program that was funded and this was an eligible cost going, I mean, would we even be able to put something up in the next 2 years to take advantage of maybe a new round of federal aid plus a state revolving fund? Or is that just wishful thinking?
No, I mean, I think the dollar value is the question. What is it going to cost? I mean, we've done some preliminary design work. If in fact someone said there's money to be had, get a 25% design in the next 12 months, we could do that. During our initial wastewater, or utility, I have a 20-year capital plan we're working on for water and wastewater. I'll share that with you once it gets a little further baked, because it's about pipe replacement, segments, pump stations, pumps, infrastructure that is difficult for anyone to kind of see because you can't see it. It's buried. 99% of the stuff's buried. So when I tell you need to replace this pipe, it doesn't mean much to most people. I mean, this group may be able to digest it, but I think the general public would struggle understanding that there are 100-year-old clay tile rip mains that run through Main Street and Roger Street that carry all the wastewater. It's hard to believe that, but it's what we have. So the cost of this project is yet to be determined. We have had an initial look by the engineering firm doing our master plan. Just dive into it kind of from the edges, but it's a good planning tool for us. We have an engineering firm on call that could serve as our project manager, but we would have to get into a contract with a designer, and we could do that in time if someone said there's a funding source available from the federal government. They want 25% designs in within 12 months. We could do that. We know where it's going. We own the land. We know what it looks like. There's basically only a handful of options for secondary treatment. Do we want to go tried and true method, or do we want to go with the fancy bells and whistles method? Maybe something in the middle. Or maybe go for just the basic. That'll be determined as we get through the design process, but we can do that in a short period of time when we need to. And initially, EPA wanted to know what it would look like, and we gave them some scenarios. We gave them 4 scenarios of what it would look like, and those were basically the Chevy through the Mercedes version of secondary treatment.
Was there a cost associated with either of those 4?
Again, it ranges from 60 to 80, I guess. I mean, if we want to just throw out random numbers, but again, that has not been honed to a point where it's digestible. If a city council called me tomorrow and said, "What's it going to cost?" I'd say the same thing. I don't know. I know the number, just throwing out a number is unhelpful in this situation, because it leads people to think that's all it could ever be, when it could be higher, it could be lower. Unlikely lower, potentially higher.
Before we lose Joel and or John, can we bring back, if the answer to Paul's question, where does it fit in? I think we need to have a separate meeting in and of its own on the secondary treatment plant and the woes that come down there, so that we're brought up to speed and educated on what we're looking at going forward. But coming back to the school issue, I know that a few of the counselors, too, in particular, and the administration are looking for us to give them a review and letter of support with regards to the combined East Gloucester and Veteran School. Do we have any more questions for John or Joel's expertise as a member of the school committee? I know that I have one looking back, sitting on this committee, looking back at that Gloucester Public School Master Plan study that was done and distributed on or about 2014, we know that these schools are ancient. We know that they've had problems since then. We know that we've done what we just talked about on other things, is look past them and put Band-Aids on them. I've heard Paul gave a good analogy about fixing an old car with putting money into these schools. And I heard one today at a senior event at Stage 4 Park where they looked at these schools as a dental process, a root canal of sorts, where you spend all kinds of money fixing a tooth that you end up yanking out anyway. And that's what I think we need to come to terms with. I know that in looking at what the state has offered, the MSBA on schools, looking historically back through their website, I haven't seen another community grab 2 schools like we have in recent years with the contributions back that we're getting. Joel, maybe you can correct me on that, but I think that with the amount that's being given to us, up to $26.9 million there on the table, close to 40% of this money that's here. With all the other political issues aside, from a capital approach to get a school and a building that could last upwards to 50 years. We know we got 74 out of East Gloucester. This seems like a good opportunity. It seems like an opportunity to capture some MSBA money and move forward. But I just wanted to hear the position, again, using Joel's expertise as a member of this committee, the school committee, and John's expertise. Where do we go forward with regards to that letter of support? And do we have any other questions we need answered before we construct one?
Well, to answer the first part, you're right. We are a rare instance in which we got through an MSBA process and then immediately got accepted right back into the pipeline. That shows that we did a good job with the first project. It also shows that we really, really need to replace these schools. And one of the things I'm repeatedly told, from the people we've hired who do MSBA projects throughout the state, they keep saying, this is a really great sign, but obviously, if we were to lose this because the override fails, it really not only resets us, but puts us at a much weaker standing, because next time the MSBA looks at us in our application, they go, yeah, listen, Gloucester, we've been through this before with you. We got all the way through, and then your voters said, take a hike. So we're not going to go down that path again. We're going to go find a community that, wants to get this done. It doesn't depend if the administration, the school committee want to get it done, but the voters don't. So there certainly is that additional pressure. If we want to try and go for the hat trick and get out of the East Gloucester Vets rebuild and hop right into a Plum Cove Beeman rebuild, we have to pull this one off the same way that West Parish got pulled off, getting it done properly.
I'd agree. Paul, any comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the numbers that we're using are still pretty valid. If this debt exclusion vote goes down, are we still talking roughly $36 million to fix up the 2 existing buildings so that they're habitable? I mean, that number's been in the...
So the $18 million number is the estimate that was given for the most basic level of repair work over at East Gloucester. It doesn't improve East Gloucester as far as making proper, but to keep it a viable building that you can safely put humans inside of in the winter and in all seasons is like $18 million right off the bat. And I think Mike can probably tell you better than I. That's as bad, but it's not inconceivable that you'd spend similar money to do similar work at Vets after you were done at East Gloucester to also keep Vets as a habitable space, again, without improving any of the conditions for the educational concerns of the building. So that's how the 36 number gets put up there. It's just the East Gloucester number done twice. And then again, ignores the fact that in the meanwhile, regardless, Mike's crew is over trying to keep Beeman alive and Plum Cove to a lesser extent alive also while we wait through either process.
I think Joel and I both weighed in on this in the paper, but I just wanted to be able to, how are we going to draft this letter? I guess it's through a question. What, is there something that you want to take a crack at it, Ted? Do you want to, or is there something that can be short and sweet that we're going to, that doesn't need to be full of a lot of facts? Or does it need to be somewhat well-constructed argument? I'm not sure
think that
what
there's enough.
the expectation is.
Well, I'll yield to the expertise of the committee, but I think there is enough. If you take aside, the 3 or 4 groups in the city that are posturing around question 3, for the lack of a better term, and you take that argument out of it, the facts are that we have buildings that have lived their life's purpose. They're 72 and 67 years old, or 74 and 67 years old. One hasn't had, when I went there, a stream or a water running through the bottom of it. They have, mechanical issues, electrical issues, copper pipe issues, disability access issues, and on and on and on. And we have, as Joel so well put, we've got an opportunity now to take what we did, or our proven track record, and capture 40% of the money up front. Down the road, we're going to throw that bad money, like you used, Paul, when we talked before, with the automobile scenario. We're throwing an awful lot of bad money into a junk car if we don't take the what's there before us. And I think if we crafted a letter based on the current school inadequacies, the new school benefits, the benefits to the city from a financial point, the benefits to the teachers from an ability to educate in a better environment and atmosphere, and most importantly, the benefit to the students, which we're all advocating for, then we could craft some bullet points in a letter that way and tie them in with perhaps John's expertise on the financial considerations that we've proven in that track record that we're worthy enough to be given money in a cycle right after coming out of a cycle, that we're going to get 40%. There isn't one person that wouldn't want to buy anything 40% off. It's just it's a big nut. The remaining portion is a big cost. But I think that if we were able to compile something based on fact and not emotion, and lay those cards out in a bulleted correspondence, which would, in my opinion, go to the mayor to be distributed through the mayor's report to the city council, then I just that's just my opinion. I would support that process and that.
I think a big point to make, because obviously the 2 arguments in the community against it, one of them is, well, the buildings wouldn't be in such bad shape if we'd just done a better job taking care of them, yada, yada, yada. And to be fair, until Mike's crew took over direct control and maintenance of the buildings, we weren't doing a good job taking care of them. I don't think anyone denies that when the school committee was in charge, their focus was on educational resources and less about capital planning and building resources. And so, I think it's important to address an argument and go, even if East Gloucester was in excellent shape, everything worked, it would still be an inadequate school building in which to teach K through 5 students in the year 2020, and certainly in the year 2030, and definitely in the year 2040, and frankly, back in the year 2000, right? It was already kind of out of date at that point. And so I think it's important to address that. Yeah, it's in rough shape, maybe because there was some lax maintenance, but even a perfect version of East Gloucester, you'll find a perfectly preserved late 1940s school building. It's an inadequate space to teach in the 21st century. And then someone brought up to me the other day, which I didn't even know, again, I was too young to remember. My understanding is that there was actually an override on the ballot in the 90s for like $1 million or $2 million to do repairs or renovations to veterans, and it failed. Do either of you remember that? Was that a thing? And so again, I don't know that we're working into our letter, but it's one of those things you go, well, you know, hell, the same people who are complaining about not taking care of it may have been the same people who voted against an override in the 90s that may have put veterans on a better track for, you know, physical conditions. But again, going back to the point of, even if that override had passed, that work had been done in the 90s, veterans would still be the wrong shape and size to teach school in 2020, you know?
Go ahead, Mark.
What I was going to say is, you know, so that we don't get in the middle of this location crosshairs, I think one of the points I'd make too is the $36 million renovation isn't going to come with grants and assistance. And again, we've discussed 100 times, it's just a patch on the issue. I mean, one of the points in the letter I think that we should make as well is, you know what, and I agree with what Joel's saying, but in the same light, you know what, it's always easy to say what everybody did wrong 10 years ago, and talking about it's not changing it. I mean, we're in a fiscal position at this point to borrow money at probably the cheapest we have since, I'm going to say back in the, I don't know, even the 50s. You're getting a grant. It makes no sense to renovate 2 buildings. It makes no sense to staff principals, vice principals for 2 buildings when, and I think it was Joel that told me that 77 children that get bused to East Gloucester.
No, it's the other way around. It's like of the 220 kids that go to East Gloucester, only 70 to 80 of them actually live in East Gloucester. The other 140 live outside of East Gloucester. So
correct. So
they
I
can't afford to live in East Gloucester anymore, so there aren't kids in East Gloucester anymore.
And that's a valid point in consideration too, because the majority of the kids are being bused to East Gloucester. That's an additional expense as well. I mean, it's going to take one bus to take all the kids from East Gloucester to veterans. I mean, I think if we make it on the financial points and show the people dollars and cents, you know, we know we're going to have to do this. You really can only kick the can down the road so far. And as Joel said, I went to East Gloucester in the many, many moons ago, and with Ted was there too. And those rooms aren't set up for the technology. They're not set up for the air. They're not set up for any of what we see as an acceptable environment for kids to learn today. But I think rather than beating what we should have done, rather than beating the drum about, well, I'm so sick of hearing about where it is, it's got to happen. So where it happens isn't as big of an issue as paying for it, from what my position on this committee is. And I don't think there's a better time to do it. I mean, it's not, you know, listen, nobody playing on COVID-19, and the white lining here is the lower rates. We've got costs. We're going to get grants and what have you. So, I mean, I would propose that we focus more on the financial side so that we get less of the confusion with all the blahs on the other 3 sides. My opinion.
I'd agree with that, Mark. If the committee's charge is to have a fiduciary oversight or responsibility on the capital level, this project fits those bills to a T. 40% from the state up front, with the ability to borrow the remainder at a tremendously low rate, with a building that is going to last at least or at best 50 years. That's the charge we were given when we signed up for this committee, and this project fits that with all the other facets aside. Now, I don't know if our letter would posture or position any of the arguments, that regarding a softball field to affordable housing in East Gloucester, all the comments we've heard in the community. But I think from the charge of the committee, it would be the responsible thing to do. It's just a matter of which one of us or which couple of us want to take a craft to it. And the only way I think it would make sense to do it is to have a draft circulated around to all of us, and everybody get the ability to comment and make sure it fits what they intend to vote on and feel.
So just two things there. We can't edit as a committee via email. That's considered deliberation outside of a posted meeting. So we can all receive it and all come up with edits. We'd have to reconvene a meeting to then share our edits. Or otherwise, we just put them all together and send them to you, and you can take them as you see fit. To your point, I think you're absolutely right. We just look at our charge and say, hey, here's how it fits in. It fits in really well. I would just think it'd be good to throw in a sentence or two that says we've also examined the alternative, and we find that to be, financially irresponsible capital planning because it's no less expensive and the end result is inferior.
Ted, can I add one thing real quick?
Sure.
I don't think the school committee did a bad job managing these buildings historically. I think there was a period in time when these buildings had reached their life expectancy that the dollars needed to keep them, further enhanced was taking away from the educational component that the school department or the school committee, their total budget. And so they made the decision to not invest in the physical plant, invest in the educational component of it. But prior to that, they did a decent job. There was maintenance men assigned to each building. Today, we don't have that. I have 4 maintenance men for all the city buildings. Way back in the day, you had a maintenance man dedicated to the buildings. So I think they did a good job once upon a time, but when the buildings reached the end of their useful lifetime, there was a decision that had to be made, and they made the right decision, as far as I'm concerned. These buildings don't last forever. We know that they're inadequate from a spatial standpoint, from a technology standpoint. So again, I don't want to see the school committee take a hit that they failed to manage these buildings over the past 70 to 50 years. I think they did a decent job of it. It's just they hit a wall, and those buildings are tired and they need to be replaced. And that's what happened.
Right, and that's to make it clear, Tony Gross was on the school committee forever. He'll be the first one to tell you that, when, as you said, the decision came, he said, well, we can either replace this set of windows and lay off these 3 teachers, or we can keep these 3 teachers in the classroom. The windows didn't get repaired, right? It wasn't, they didn't appreciate that windows were important. It was that, it was either windows or teachers, and the school committee obviously was geared toward preserving teachers versus the windows.
Mike?
Yes.
The Mark. One of the things I think when we draft the letter, and you know what, one of the things I find, I agree, but I don't see any reason to disparage anybody in our recommendation. The problem is it's always easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. If your budget is $1,000 a year and something goes wrong in your household, it is what it is. And for us to disparage anybody in the city isn't, something that I believe this organization, we're to look at the financials and make a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation, but I don't think it's to attack any body or group, because I think that's the problem. Everybody wants to throw something out there to distract you. Oh, this one could have done that, and that one. To me, that's all a moot point. That ship sailed, it's gone. The building in East Gloucester, it was built with brick and mortar. I mean, it hasn't been maintained. You can't maintain it. I was in charge of a granite building that we had to spend $30,000 every 3 years to repoint. Now, the only one that could afford it is the rich guy that owns it, but no other normal person would do that.
Well, I think again, I'm certainly not saying, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to make sure that in my head, the information I'm providing is not what I'm thinking for this letter. The letter in my head would just say, as Ted mentioned, here's all the boxes it checks. It's financially responsible. The end product is, meets the goals set by the city for its students, yada, yada, yada. And the alternatives do not meet any of it. I certainly wouldn't want to rehash the path and say,
Right.
if only someone had done this. I was just kind of saying that for discussion purposes, but the letter should certainly just be, here's why the new school makes sense, and here's why repairing the old schools does not make sense. The end.
So that being said, Joel, if it's the will of the committee to go forward, I can take a stab at the letter. I'll anybody that has any bullets or comments that wants to send them up, unless we have I know we have a lawyer in the group, and I know you guys have both written to the paper and they've come out well. So barring anybody else raising their hand, If somebody else wants to, I have no problem with that, but I think we probably should move and reflect what we have all discussed, as if we're all on the same page, what we feel, and tie it into what the charge is or what we believe that is for this committee, and come up with some one pager that's short and sweet and describes, just like you said, the benefits for the irresponsibility of not the fiscal considerations, and that's short and sweet of what our position would be.
You want a formal motion on that, or just looking for informal? Go ahead.
No, I think probably a motion to proceed with that. Joel, if before anybody throws a motion out, you have more probably experience with the Zoom and this public meeting law. We cannot deliberate a letter back and forth. What's the best way in everybody's mind to handle it after the fact?
Well, so your options are, you'd write the letter, distribute it out, and we could, without replying to everybody, send direct letter comments to you, and you at your discretion could edit as you saw fit, and then let us know what the final is. Or alternatively, you'd send it out to us and call a meeting, and we'd all kind of reconvene at the meeting and then hash out any edits that were suggested by each of us. I think this is gonna be a simple enough letter that if you draft something and we all throw you some comments,
Yeah.
if you have any, you have the discretion to just, touch it up as necessary.
Okay, why don't we go that route then?
All right, then I'm gonna make a motion that we instruct the chair to draft a letter of support for the East Gloucester Veterans Consolidation Project at Webster Street, along the guidelines that we have just discussed, that he provide an opportunity for us to provide edit input after he's drafted his first draft, and discretion will remain with the chair for the final draft that goes out into the mayor's report.
I'll second that.
All right.
Is
We
there
have
a
a motion
time
made.
frame, just as an aside, is there a time frame you want to try to turn this around in?
I would like to
ASAP.
have it done as soon as possible. I'll
Okay.
get on it, then I get something by midweek, if not first thing next week.
Fine.
All right, so we have a motion that's made and seconded. All those in favor?
You have to do a roll
Aye.
call vote because it's on Zoom.
Oh, you're right. Paul Romery,
Yes, aye.
Joel Favazza,
Yes.
Mark Olson,
Yes.
Ted Costa. Yes, so unanimous. That being said, I think we've dealt with the school issue. The only other issue, Joel, how are you doing for time? I don't have a,
Yeah, about 10 minutes.
okay. So, John, do we have anything else on the school if you're still with us, or did we drop John off?
Well, no, I'm still here, but to be truthful, I would like to drop off. I'm on vacation. So,
John, you could drop off unless Mike thinks he needs you. Mike, the only other item on the agenda, we've had some progress with all that is, and we've talked about a lot of them today. The top 5 in the Dora and Whittier projects that we got information on, being the high school field house, the visitor center at Sageford Park, the police and station and courthouse, and City Hall. I know that we've got a grant on at City Hall with some money. We have some perhaps preservation money. I don't know of much movement with the police station, but could you fill us in on anything that's changed on those 4 projects?
We are wrapping up the Gloucester High School Fieldhouse project right now. There was obviously a delay in materials due to COVID. Everything's delayed. Manufacturing just kind of came to a halt in the spring and beginning of the summer. But we were successful in managing that project to get us to where we are today. If you haven't seen it, Brian Lafata, the athletic director, has kind of been documenting the progress through his Instagram page. It's fantastic. It looks beautiful. It really does. Minor punch list. We hope to be able to turn that over to the school department or the high school in the upcoming weeks. The visitors center, same situation. We are nearly done. Some punch list items. A few things kind of through the cracks on the bid. Who's responsible for painting, who's not responsible for painting certain things. Very, very small items. Nothing to worry about. Looks great. We're closing up the season anyway. but we're 99% done on that project. City Hall and the police and courthouse projects, we have identified an OPM, same OPM who did the Harbor Masters building, who did the visitor center, as well as the field house. CMS, they are excellent. They are the best owner's project manager I've ever worked with. I can't say enough about them, and I hope they are on board for all our projects coming forward. So we will assemble a building committee for the City Hall and the police station projects soon. Our focus has been working on the schools and cleaning up the few projects we have underway currently. So I'd expect the mayor to announce a building committee for those two projects soon. And then we'll get under design soon after, and they will take shape. Funding has been identified for City Hall to some degree, and we'll pull the trigger on what needs to be done at the police station. And again, I think, as Paul mentioned earlier, that project does seem to have grown. It's grown out of necessity due to some code triggers. As you start to expand certain things, you must do this. You start to recognize that there's an equity between the male and female officers and how they, in fact, maneuver through the building. So that'll be taken care of soon.
Michael, where did the field house and visitor center come in budget-wise? We were over on some things. There's some structural issues that weren't identified well enough during the design. We could have spent the extra money on the design to identify those. I kind of wish we had, but it's probably half dozen of one, sixth of another. I think in the end it shook out to be the same thing. Sometimes you miss things on design that cost you more than the bid, but if you identified them during the design, you would have paid for them during the bid. So I think we're okay. I'd say probably 120 over, plus or minus. But that 120 would have been there regardless whether we picked it up or not. Campbell Construction was good on pricing for us. A lot of it was time and materials, no big markup. So we finished that project to where we are today. That building's not going to be touched by anyone in our lifetimes other than routine maintenance. Any questions of Mr. Hale while we have him here on these projects? There being none, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, that was the only two items that we had on the agenda. Is the will of the committee to have another meeting to deal with the secondary treatment plant, or do we want to wait for some more time as things evolve to might be premature, but I'll do whatever you guys think we need to do, or do we want to keep meeting? I think we were good prior. We're just getting into a group prior to all that was COVID. Do we want to try and set up a regular time with the members that are present that works for us to reconvene and have a constant meeting or meeting time and date?
Maybe we should.
When are we going to get back together for the letter? End of next week or the following?
I hope to have something back to you guys by way of that initial draft, the first, no later than the mid of next week.
So probably the week after, or Monday after, or Tuesday?
Well, again, my motion was to just let him receive our edits outside of a meeting and put it together without us.
All right. That's fine.
Do we want to wait to see if that federal grant comes in and then see if that project is going forward? Because I imagine that if it's a 25% match on the city side, the city is going to have to bond that money, and it'll be good to have a recommendation from the CAB to the city council on that before they take it up. So should we just wait until we find out if we got the grant and then deal with the sewer plant then?
That makes more sense.
That was at the council 2 meetings ago.
Well, there you go.
It was, honestly, this process with the grant, like I said, it's like walking into a closed door. And all of a sudden they said the possibility is real and we needed to move on the local authorization. So John was able to quickly do that. Joe was able to quickly do that, and we presented that at council a few weeks ago. It was not an attempt to get around the CIAB. It was the timing of it.
You know, Mike, I was there. I forgot. I was actually
Yeah.
there. I should have known that.
Wow. And you're younger than
Sorry.
me, Joe? Oh, and I'm the old guy.
All my Zooms blend together too, Joel, so I feel for you.
And John Dunn here, if I can interrupt, Mike is exactly right. We had to move quickly on that to make a commitment in order to have that grant come forward. So we did it. Better to take the money and try and move forward. And if somebody doesn't approve of taking somebody else's money, then raise your hand.
All right, guys, I'm going to hop off. You guys can figure out what you want to do for the next meeting and just let me know. And I'll see you then. Okay?
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
Hey, Joe.
Paul, Mark, what do we think? We want to go on a monthly schedule, or you want to?
Yeah.
Give it a shot. I mean, we've got the holidays coming up, so that's going to interfere with a few things, but I'd say we give it.
We're hardly traveling. I mean, we might be able to get in between the travel holidays because I'm not sure who's traveling. Some are, some aren't.
What I'll do then is since we lost a quorum with Joel dropping off, I will reach out to Jill, find out what her availability is. I'll kick an email out to everybody trying to find an agreeable date or time, given a couple of choices. I think this 5:30 time works good. We'll just hone in on a day, and then we'll, once a month would fit if they have agenda items that look forward. I know that Jill wanted to go and discuss the drafting of or redusting off the comprehensive plan that exists there. But I'll touch base with Jill and get back to everybody on that if that's all right.
Sounds good to me, Ted.
Sounds good to me.
So when Joel dropped off, we lost our quorum, so a motion to adjourn wouldn't be proper. It stopped at that time, and we'll end this meeting, and I'll get back to you guys the mid part or the early part of next week.
Okay. Look forward
Okay,
to it.
thanks, Ted. See you,
John,
Paul.
if you're still there, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Mike,
John.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Jill.
All right. Thank you. Have a good
Back to
weekend.
vacation, John.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Night.
Bye.
Good night.